We will waste no further time and jump into it. Dan Brady, welcome to Out of the Hourglass. How are you this morning?
I'm excited to be here, Molly. Like I said before we jumped on here, it's been a while, so it's so great to see you.
It has. I know you and I connected a couple weeks ago, actually, which very nicely kind of led us to this conversation talking about a real estate group retreat. You're part of one of the real estate peer groups that we run. So this conversation is actually going to be really exciting because I feel like this topic is just a kind of a growing area of energy for a lot of business owners wanting to kind of get diverse in their assets. But before we get to all the good stuff, let's just jump in. Let's make an introduction of who you are, where you are from, and what do you do?
My name is Dan Brady. I own Dan Brady Painting, and you just told me I've been a member of the Nolan Consulting Group for over 18 years, which just
Yeah.
blows my mind. So
Yeah, mine too.
But no, we've got a painting business in northern Michigan. We range from 15 to 25 painters depending on the year. Once we move into summer, we get closer to 25. And then, the winter time, we're kind of around that 15 painter mark.
Mhm.
And thanks to you all, I've set it up with systems. So I've got a salesperson, I've got an operations manager, I have a field supervisor, I've got an accountant, a bookkeeper, all those little things. I'd say I'm not totally out of the hourglass, but being part of the Nolan Group or the Nolan Consulting Group has really allowed me to venture into different things that I wouldn't have been able to do if I was totally in the hourglass, as Brian likes to say.
Yeah, it's safe to say you are keeping busy, and we'll talk a bit about that. You've got plenty of other kind of business ventures that you're pouring your time into. And yes, you have been with us for 18 and a half years. You joined in September of 2006, which is crazy.
I know.
And you've
This
been
is
through a couple
crazy.
coaches in that time frame. Who
Yeah.
who did you start with?
Yeah, so I started with your dad, Brian, and then I think it was with Andrew, and now I've been with Steve for the last several years. But yeah, so I've kind of made my rounds, and it's neat because it's given me different perspective, different personalities, and helped me focus on different aspects of my business. But I remember when I first joined, had no business joining, couldn't afford the monthly payment, but somebody said you just got to do it, so I did. But I told your dad that I don't want to hire another employee until I know if I'm making money on the employee I already have. So
Yeah.
I wanted to know my numbers before I started to grow. So your dad helped me with that. And then, I still run my business the same way. We look a lot at gross profit and the numbers, and that kind of steers the ship.
Awesome. The numbers tell the story. It's
And
what
they
we
do.
always say.
Like it or not. Like it
Like
or
it or not,
not.
ugly or healthy, they are
Right?
the reality.
So true.
Well, awesome. We appreciate you being a longtime client. You bring such a good culture. Yeah, I know it's been fun to have you a part of this group, and I'm excited that you and I are kind of are reconnecting because
I know. It's been
it has been a
too
while.
long. I'm excited.
Let's talk about kind of this business venture that you have poured a lot of energy into. As I said, you are part of the real estate peer group that we facilitate here, and you have been in real estate for quite some time. What
Mhm.
prompted you to move into the real estate vacation rental space?
I mean, just growing up, I observed from just people around town that seemed to be doing really well financially. I observed
Mhm.
two things. One, they owned businesses, and they also owned quite a bit of real estate. So just kind of having that entrepreneurial blood in me. I knew I wanted to have some sort of business. I didn't know it'd be a painting business, but I knew that the really wealthy people seemed to own quite a bit of real estate. So that always kind of piqued my interest. I always thought, oh, I needed to be a dentist or a doctor or something to be really wealthy, but I wasn't that smart. So
I
I
don't think
wasn't
you're
that
giving yourself
smart.
enough credit.
No, so I've always, had my finger on, okay, when I can afford to buy my first property, I'm gonna buy something. So that's
Mhm.
what I did, way back in the late '90s, and I've just been kind of a buy and hold type person, and now we've not really built it into a huge portfolio, but I've found my sweet spot with what seems to cash flow and kind of taken in that direction, and it's been a ton of work, but starting to reap some of the rewards of the hard work.
So would you say it's kind of a slow return?
Yeah, for the way I've done it over the years, it's been slower, but I always tell tell people that real estate has four things that I think everybody should look at. It has appreciation, depreciation, tax benefits, and income. So there's definitely, if you run say a successful $2 million painting company, you're taking home at about 500 grand a year. And how much of that are you going to be given to Uncle Sam, so real estate's a great way to be able to write that off, so you can put more in the bank than, pay to Uncle Sam legally. So it's
strategic.
It is. It's very strategic. So
yeah. Tell me about your first property. What was the first property that you acquired?
I was actually in Grand Rapids, Michigan, selling for, it was my first job out of college, selling for a computer consulting company. And I bought this little house kind of in the hood. Now listen to this. I bought it for $45,000.
That is shocking.
So this was, I know. So this was late 90s, sketchy neighborhood. And the house was it was actually kind of somebody had fixed it up. So the reason I bought it, it had 4 bedrooms and a bathroom. It had a bathroom, imagine that. But 4 bedrooms. So what I did is my mortgage payment was like $350. Can you imagine that?
That's like a decent car payment these days.
Right, exactly. I know, or not even,
yeah,
right?
Not even, correct.
But it had, I was a single, guy just out of college. So what I did is with the 3 other bedrooms, I rented them out to my friends, the co-workers. And so they call it now a pad split. I did a pad split way back in the day where I lived in one of the bedrooms and rented the other 3 out. And I think I rented each bedroom for $250. So I was pulling in like $750 on a mortgage payment that was $350. Plus they were helping me with the utilities. And again, it's just from, I knew I wanted to buy as soon as I can. And I did that. And since paying rent in college, I've always had my business or renters pay my mortgages for me. So that was the first
cool
one.
to say. Yeah. That's a good track record.
Heck yeah. So that was 29 Grove in Grand Rapids. And then from there, I bought a fourplex, and that was in Grand Rapids. I'm no longer in Grand Rapids. I live in Traverse City, Michigan.
Okay.
So I sold those when I moved north, but that was my first one. A great experience.
That's awesome. So you've been in the game for a while then. Now it's not just like you didn't get into real estate, after having the painting business. This was something that you jumped into during college and have never really stopped.
Yeah. No, I knew I didn't want to pay rent after college. I knew I was gonna, and although I had to sell that one, all the other ones I bought now in Traverse City, I've held on to, but I knew I needed to make the move north, at that point in my career, if I was going to do it, or I was going to, it was a great company. I tell people everybody should have a job where they're a salesperson. And that job. I was a salesperson. They had an awesome sales training program. The guy that started this company is named Stephen Bisciotti. Him and his college buddy started it out of their parents' basement. And Stephen Bisciotti, if you look him up now, owns the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, just a super successful guy that had just amazing systems where, he would bring in young college guys, teach them how to sell, and we would sell staffing services for them. So that was one of my takeaways, though, is everybody should have that good sales job to learn how to sell.
Yeah, those are skills that you just take with you wherever you go.
For sure.
So you now have a business called Adventure North Vacation Rentals. When did that come to fruition? So
I moved back to Traverse it was early 2000, and that's about the time I started my painting business.
Okay.
So, and I bought a duplex. So this was probably 2002. I lived in half of that duplex and rented the other half out. And then a short while after that, I was out for a jog and found this cool little property on the corner up the road from the duplex. And I was looking for a spot for my painting business. And I noticed that house was on 3 acres and had a big pole barn. So that would have been, 2006, 2007 that I kind of bought what I call now the home office. Okay. And that was back when they were so this is before Nolan. And, I was running this little painting business, really not making, just making it, enough to, pay for the duplex because I had rent coming in from the other side. And then I was like, I need an office for all my equipment, So I'm like, I wonder if I can buy this house. And that was back when, before the Great Recession, when everything went crazy with the banks, they were doing no doc loans. And my buddy said, hey, you should buy a house. And I was like, I have no business buying a house, but they're doing these no doc loans, stated income. And long story short, I ended up buying the home office. And I'm like, I cannot believe I got a loan on this sucker, but I did. So that was 2006, 2007, somewhere in there, just before, as you told me, just before I joined Nolan, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you really, what year did you say?
I have it as September 2006.
It doesn't seem, wow, that's crazy. Time flies, huh?
It sure does.
So yeah, just shortly after that, I couldn't afford to buy the house, and then I couldn't afford this consultant, that
all these new expenses.
Yeah, exactly. So, so that was back 2006. So fast forward to, I think I bought my first short-term rental, got the business going, making some money where I could actually go to the bank and get a legit loan for, this was a little waterfront property that I had my eyes on forever. It has a water ski course in front of it, and we do the slalom course every morning. And if you get a chance to look at this one, it's the slice of heaven. You would literally drop you right in front of what we call the slice of heaven now. And I'd look up every time my buddy would drop me there, and I'd say, Johnny, one day I'm going to own that. And he'd always laugh about it. Long story short, I found out through the grapevine that this cute little cottage on the hill was going up for sale. So I just approached him and said, hey, and this would have been around 2015. I said, hey, I hear you're selling. I've always loved this cottage. It's like a peninsula. So it's like at 1,000 feet of frontage. It's like this pie-shaped peninsula that I've turned into all beach now. And it's just super, super cool. And they said, yes, we are looking to sell it. They said, whoever buys it's going to have to bring all cash to the table because it's got some septic issues. I said, okay, how much? And they said, it's 300,000. And this is 2015. And, I'm running, making a little bit money painting, but even 300,000 back in 2015 for me, was, you might as well said 1.5 million. It's like, it was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And, but I had, thanks to, this is fast forward. I've been with you guys for about 9 or so years. And so I had good financials. I was able to take those to the bank. Pretty good reputation too at that point. And it seems like every time I've gotten a loan over the years, I'm like, I can't believe they gave me a loan. I was like,
I fooled them again.
I know. Yeah. I always feel like that way. I was like, you should be doing this. There's just this like buyer's remorse I always get. And then, which, kind of gives me energy to go forward and finish off the property. But yeah, so I was able to the deal with this property was the septic. So they were thinking I was going to bring all cash to close. Well, one of my best friends owns an excavating company, and we went over there and looked at it, and we were able to get a new septic and drain field put in. So I was able to traditionally finance this property, and that was 300,000, over about 10 years ago. So that's, that in
and
itself.
I'm curious, what would that go for now?
Yeah. So now, I mean, it's only 1,000 square feet. It's just the lot, and it sits up on a hill and it overlooks the lake, and it's got this huge beach. So, I mean, you're probably at least in the $700,000 range, for this. And I have people even this year that are always offering me, they're like, hey, if you ever want to sell, it's a really unique piece of property. So that's what got my start in it, was the slice of heaven. And I knew I was going to short-term rental it. I knew I couldn't afford to have a second home. So I just started with the short-term rental. And it's funny, I had this talking, I don't want to go off in a ton of different directions, but these vision boards that everybody talks about, I did a vision board back in the day, and I had literally that cottage up on my vision board with a Mastercraft ski boat in front of it. And I took a picture after I bought that place, and I had a retro Mastercraft ski boat. It almost looked like
that is cool.
My vision board, which is,
true manifestation.
If you're into vision boards, boards or not. I haven't done one in a long time, but back in the day, I had it sitting next to my desk, and that was
Yeah.
it. But that was the slice of heaven that got the short-term rental end of things going for me,
I love it.
and that's kind of what my business is now, is made up of 7 short-term rentals, 6 of which I own myself. My wife and me own 6, and then I've got a partner in one of the properties I own with some partners, my brother-in-law and our tile guy buddy. We have a place down on the river together.
Awesome. You have fun names for them too. I mean, there's that Slice of Heaven. Isn't there one
Yeah.
like this, that 70s?
Yeah, that 70s lodge.
Yep.
That was the second one I bought, and that's almost 5,000 square foot. It'll sleep 30, and again,
Oh,
had
wow.
no business buying it, but we did it and figured it out after the fact. And that one has, I don't know, like 8 or 10 bedrooms, and they're all themed. If you can look it up, just Google the 70s lodge, and they're all themed from the 70s. So every room has a different theme. So like Star Trek, I Dream of Jeannie, all these fun like 70s shows themes, and people have just, as soon as we started redoing it and I started posting pictures, people just, for whatever reason, they love the 70s decade. And that, thank you Jesus, that, because again, I'm buying it kind of on a shoestring. It's 5,000 square feet. I know I'm probably getting into some other questions here, but I typically look for the properties that nobody else wants. They're too run down. These, I typically can buy them at a huge discount. And I don't know if it's true, but I've been told I have good vision for like properties, of doing things with them that nobody else would have thought of. And my designers, from the painting end of things, I work with all these great designers that give me input on what I should do. And one of my favorite designers, Deneen, was like, hey, I said, it's 5,000 square feet. I don't have a huge budget to fix this thing up. What can we do? And she's like, let's just make it a retro 70s themed vacation rental. So her and her friend just started bringing over their station wagon with, lots of 70s stuff, telling me what we were going to do. And half the things they said we were going to do, I was like, oh, I don't think we'll do that. But we did end up doing it. But that property had water in the basement that I had to figure out. It had, just all of these, the lot itself was just all overgrown with these huge trees. And it was a lot. In between running the business and trying to get that one done, I just felt like it almost took me out. But
yeah,
you're
up for a challenge.
We got it to the finish line, and I mean, we're hosting a Michigan meetup over there on Thursday. It's become really popular in Michigan, and different investors like to check it out. So I'm hosting a meetup over there on Thursday. It's just kind of taken on a life of its own. It had an indoor pool when I bought it, and all these small little bedrooms. So I knew that indoor pool was cracked and dilapidated. So I made that the game room. So I made this 2,000 square foot pool area, just this huge game room with big flat screen TVs, pool, ping pong, just, the thing when you get together with all your friends, or you got a big family, all different types of groups we've had there, golfers, bachelor party, bachelorette parties, family reunions. The former owners of the place have rented it twice and can't believe
that's
what we've done
cool.
with
That's
it.
full circle.
Yeah, so the Waltons, they've come back twice. Another owner, the Ludkas, are renting it. And listen to this, people rent it like a year in advance. I mean, we've already are getting rentals for like 2026 right now. So
that's awesome. I mean, that's ideal.
That is ideal. And that's what, again, sorry, Molly, I feel like I'm running into a bunch of your questions, but
no, this is great. I mean, you kind of hit it a little bit earlier. I mean, this particular one was a challenge, especially as you're trying to run, the operations of your business. How do you balance managing both the 7, properties as well as the painting business?
I laughed when I saw that question, because I don't know if you saw the interview with Elon Musk the other day when somebody asked him that question, and he goes, honestly, an honest look on his face, he goes, not very well. And
we'll take the honesty.
Like, of course, everybody jumped all over him for that. But I mean, I just see it on a minuscule scale of what he does. I like had that same feeling, like not very well. But That's how I feel sometimes, just kind of holding on by a shoestring. But honestly, again, kind of backtracking to the beginning of when we started talking, just, having systems in place to where I can, typically I'll check in the morning, 7 a.m. at the office, kind of make my presence there. Not every morning though. I mean, there can be weeks where if I'm in the middle of a big project where I'm more remote and I'm not checking in at the office. For a painting company, most of our work is not done, on site. So the painters are going directly to the site. So I'll usually check in with Tracy, who's our operations person, in the AM. And then if we've got a project going, I'll usually spend, mid-morning, afternoon kind of out at the project, kind of being a project coordinator for whatever we have going on with the property.
On the rental side, who helps you manage these properties? I mean, I know you mentioned you have a partner on one of them, but who helps you do all of the things?
Yeah, right. If you have an Airbnb or a short-term rental, they're not, what do they say? It's not passive income. Definitely work for the income. There's a lot of back and forth when somebody goes to rent a short-term rental, and I'm sure we've all done it. There's people have lots of questions, even though
Yeah.
you put everything in the listing, they still ask you how many bathrooms it has, right? They don't read it. So you get tons of back and forth like that. And in the early day, I was doing it all, kind of answering those questions with a slice of heaven. But as this has evolved into 6 pretty high capacity short-term rentals, I brought my sister Sean actually handles the day-to-day kind of operations of it. And when I
Nice.
say day-to-day operations from the customer service standpoint, we've got our properties on a system called Owner Res. They call it a PMS, Property Management System. And that system is Owner Res. And what that does is it builds websites for all the properties, but it also keeps your calendar straight so you don't overbook, on dates. So that's kind of like Smart Sheets for the short-term rental. It's what it reminds me of. It kind of has those same graphs, that shows the schedule. And those
Because can people
are both.
book directly from like the property website and also
Yeah,
Airbnb? So you have
yeah,
multiple kind of bookings that need to come into one feed.
exactly. Yep. And that's the goal, right? It's to get people to book direct because they save money, you
Yeah.
save money. Kind of like with the Dan Brady painting brand, you try to brand your properties to where, people want to come do a real estate meetup at it. They've heard so much
Yeah.
about type thing, they want to. So each one kind of takes on a life of its own. But so Sean, who's up in Ontonagon, Michigan, which is the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, almost over to Wisconsin, she's able to handle all that stuff remotely. She makes a decent living doing it. She earns 10% of the bookings. So, and we did 7 figures on bookings this last year. So it was a nice little income that I can provide my sister living way up there where there's not a lot of opportunities like that.
Such a
We're
good
in this small
point.
little town. So that's pretty
Yeah.
cool. And we're able to, work together, which is fun. And then each property has their own cleaning crew that does the cleans. And then my wife, Lisa, we've, built it up enough now to where she was the development director at a children's museum here in town. She
Cool.
has a development background and we got so busy. I was like, you got to quit your job and come help
Yeah.
me.
Help.
Because, yeah, they're so big. I mean, and there's hot tubs, saunas, cold plunges, pools at 3 of them,
Wow.
so there's a lot going on with them. And there's a lot that, you can have the best cleaners in the world, but, we always
Extra
just
eyes are good.
yeah, yeah. Even she's really good. She's more, I think, systematized than I am, but so what she's doing now is she's just making sure she gets the final set of eyes on it before our guests show up. And that's mainly for the bigger properties, just because there are so many moving pieces at those. So the smaller ones like Slice of Heaven, we got a little one in near downtown Traverse City called the TC Bungalow, which is a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. The smaller ones, we can pretty much, they're good to go. On the bigger ones, we haven't figured out how not to get a last set of eyes on them. So, but she is walking the cleaner. One of these cleaners has really got a good set of eyes. So Lisa has been training her as we just got back from Australia. We were there for a couple weeks. So we weren't able to be the last set of eyes. So she's starting to train somebody else to be be the last set of eyes. So we'll see. It's like,
Good. Yeah. I mean, you were telling me about your trip, and it sounds like you guys, are ready to get away for another. So you got to have people so that these things can run without you, right? It doesn't rely on you
absolutely.
guys being there for the eyes.
Yes, and thankfully too, besides Lisa, we've got her brother Andy, who is kind of our on-site maintenance type guy, and I bounce him back and forth now between the properties and the painting business. He's super sharp, and all the painters really like him. And when I come across a really good project that I know we can make really good money on in the painting world, I'll pull Andy from the properties over to the painting for that project to kind of just, give it a good push.
Yeah.
And then, if we've got, like right now, we're doing that we call it the pickle barn, indoor pickleball court.
Yeah. Those pictures were awesome that you
Isn't
sent.
that fun?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm totally addicted to pickleball, like hook, line, and sinker.
Hmm.
So we've had that going on basically since October. And Andy, my brother-in-law, has been kind of, besides the construction guys that are there actually putting the framing up and stuff, I contracted that out. When we get close to finishing the property, which we are now at that pickle barn, Andy is kind of my guy that does all the final tweaks to things. And then he's like, hey, Dan, our conversation this morning was, hey, Dan, I don't know if Lisa told you that we have all these video games at these properties too. He's like, the Wheel of Fortune machine at the 70s lots isn't working. And
Oh,
we've
no.
got this real estate meetup coming up. So we're trying to get everything tip top shape. So
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, well, unplug the Wheel of Fortune machine, plug it back in. That usually fixes it. He's like, okay. And then like 3 other things that, did Lisa tell you this? And I'm like, no. I'm like, so he's over there taking care of that. And then he's jumping back over to the pickle barn. But Andy is our kind of the maintenance guy for the
Okay.
properties. And then it's a family affair. My father-in-law, he's retired. And so we just laugh. We just kind of, we just let him do whatever he wants to tinker on.
Hmm.
He's tinkering it. Usually I can guide him like,
Yeah.
hey, Larry, the runner said that the beds broke out at Hall Creek Lodge. Can you run out there and take a look at it for me? But so I can direct him, but he's retired. I try to just kind of let him. It's usually constructive,
Yeah.
and he's really cheap too. So he doesn't bill
That
me a
helps.
whole lot. Yeah. So I don't try to micromanage him at all, but he is super helpful. If something's hitting the fan and I need somebody, because we have somebody getting ready to check in and something's wrong with the hot tub, I can send Larry over there and he can usually figure it out for me. So,
Well, it just shows it's important to have, good, reliable people around you, family or not. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts to these properties. It's not, that are constantly needing attention because there's also a lot of turnover between different groups that are coming in.
big difference between long-term rental and short-term rental. These are, they're like little hotels is what they are.
Would you ever do long-term rental?
That duplex that I lived in when I first moved back to Travers, that was long-term rental.
Mhm.
When I moved out of there and moved back over to the home office, and I bought the home office, I lived at the home office for a while and just rented that out long term. I just think I was a really bad long term rental manager because every time I got the property back, it was trashed. I always had to put like $2 to $3 grand into it. And I just didn't have good systems for long-term rental, and it didn't spark my interest either.
Yeah.
Like these short-term rentals, they're a lot of work, but they really allow the creative side of me to design them, make them super fun. I mean, when I don't have to think about Dan Brady painting and I just am going out to a property, I get excited just to show up at the property because they're all so unique and cool. I try not to show up after the runners leave because that can be a little depressing sometimes.
Yeah.
I usually let the cleaners
Fair.
at least do their first run through. But thankfully, we've got a good brand. We've had over the years, knock on wood, really good runners. But I get excited going out to the short term rentals, and they're all unique, they're all fun, and we're always kind of tweaking them. And it's just something when I start talking about the short term rentals, as much work as they are and as big a headache as they can be, they get me excited, and
That matters.
yeah, and
It's part of your why. It's the joy.
yeah, exactly. And one of the podcasts that I listened to, now I won't be able to think of the name, but it's in the short term rental world. His tagline is create the lifestyle lifestyle that you don't want to take a vacation from. Create the lifestyle that you don't want to take a vacation from. And he's a short-term rental guy. And that's kind of the way I feel about, although it's work, like Elon said the other day, not doing both very well. I struggled doing both, not because I don't have good systems set up on both sides. I just find myself, things are running, but I'm still worrying for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I
Well,
want
you're
that.
invested. You're
Yeah,
invested
and
in
I
both.
just want everything. I want A+ report cards, and I want
Yeah.
5-star reviews. And I'm really hard on myself when it comes to that. So, but with the short-term rentals, they are kind of they get me excited. So.
So yeah, that matters because at the end of the day, if you're going to be spending hours and hours kind of grinding out, wanting to show something for your work, you also got to have some passion around it. And if short term versus the long term is where it's at, then that's the direction in which you go. I do wonder though. I mean, the seasonality of Traverse City and where you live. I've never been up there. I imagine that the summers are insanely beautiful, but I also imagine that the winters are pretty tough. And so how do you balance that? What does your booking calendar look like throughout the year?
That's a good question. Traverse City is really, if you look it up, I mean, it is a tourist destination, for Michigan and really for the country. Now it's really become a hot spot. So it's really thankfully become, instead of just a summer season, it's more of a 4-season type of destination. Every season has spring, summer, fall, winter has different groups that come here for different reasons. Winter
Okay.
time, we have ski resorts, and probably is our slowest season winter, but there still is. I mean, we had a pretty good winter this past winter. And what sets us apart from the competition is, the amenities that we have. We have the hot tubs, the saunas, the cold plunges. So if they're going to rent a place, it's typically weekends or long weekends during the winter. Ours typically get rented first because we have those amenities. And that's how we've kind of, on the painting side of things, we're a customer service company that paints, on the short-term rental side, it's similar to that. It's a lot of the skills that you've learned from being the customer service company that paints. It was easily transitioned over to, we are the short-term rental company that has the amenities that get us the 5-star reviews. And, a lot of that is just having an absolutely pristine property, and even when the painters, a lot of times, one of the questions in here was, how does the painting company help the rental company and vice versa?
Yeah.
The painters do spend sometimes a fair amount of time at these properties, because if we'll slow down during the winter and we don't have work, I usually have a project going on. So instead of laying a couple painters off for a month, we just have them out to the property, and we do projects. There's usually a lot going on if it's a new property, or if not, every couple of years we need to repaint these or do maintenance. And
it's a good symbiotic relationship.
Yeah. So
I like that.
and we're able to fix these properties up for pennies on the dollar that the normal, person that goes and buys a short-term rental that doesn't have a painting business, we're able to have the economies of scale of the painting company to go in, and we can paint the whole outside of the house in practically a day if you got 2 crews there, right? And you spray it out.
So true.
So
you're controlling the timeline. You've also got really great contacts, within the community.
And we do more and more of the construction, although we're not, some of the paint companies in Nolan are actual construction companies.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got to construct. We don't have that. We just figure it out, we don't do construction, I mean, if we're putting up a structure or building something, I'll contract it out, but we can get by doing a lot of the work ourselves. And that 70s lodge that was 5,000 square feet, I bought that for $315,000 back in 2017, and that's on 10 acres. With off in the distance, I can see Menards, and it's 10 minutes from downtown Traverse City. The reason I got it was because when you walked in and you saw water in the basement and you saw this pool that was it was super cool, but it was super dated, and it looked like everything needed to go.
And
But
water damage looks scary to
yeah,
a lot
yeah.
of people.
But Molly, we painted countertops. I was ready to paint cabinets, and then designers like, don't paint those cabinets.
Yeah.
Those cabinets are awesome. And they really were. I mean, they were like custom cabinets, but half the things, 3/4 of the things in that property that people would have replaced with new and
Mhm.
turned that into a $500,000 renovation project, we probably did for 200,000, and we painted 3/4 of the things, including
Wow.
floors, countertops, tile. We just got really super creative with our coatings and got really super creative with design. And that being able to have that property that now I think it
Is that
grosses.
your biggest?
That is, I've got two others that are about that size.
Okay.
Now the Hall Creek Lodge one that we bought was an old bed and breakfast, and that's sizable. That's a 6-bedroom, 6-bath with a guest house with a kitchen,
Wow.
bath, and everything too. So that's pretty sizable. But I'm able to get into these properties for that people would have to spend north of $1 million on for a lot less than that, fix it up for a lot less than that, make them super cool, put all the amenities in there, because that's what when people rent, they're not renting they want it nice, but they're not renting for the granite countertops, the
Mhm.
brand new cabinets. They have that. They're typically well-off people. They have granite countertops at their house. They've got all these
Yeah.
cool things. They're renting for an experience, and they're renting for amenities, and they're renting for something different. So that's what we've tried to position ourselves, that we're spending the money on, one of the properties has a shipping container pool
Oh, wow.
that we put in the backyard. That's lake and lodge. And that's something that nobody else has, is a shipping
Yeah.
container pool with a big glass window in the side of it. So the kids feel like they're fish in a big fish tank,
That is very
and
cool.
when people are flipping through pictures with mom and dad and the kids see that, which property are they going to choose? And they're, so
You're speaking to all generations then with kind of what
you are,
you're looking to create.
you really are having kids' rooms. Lake and Lodge has a little climbing wall that climbs up into like a little fort that they can get into, that is the bunk room. I always try to make something for everybody to be entertained. So
Let's talk a little bit about the financials, like of running this side of the business. Obviously, you said last year you guys did 7 figures, which is amazing. Is the return what you expected it to be? And then has that grown every year?
So initially starting out, it isn't, right? Back in
Yeah,
2000, it
it's
was,
slow.
yeah, very slow. But finding, and even when I slice of heaven, I mean, it was back then, it was paying for itself. I had this cool lakefront property that was paying for itself. Thank God, because I didn't have any money to pay for it. It had to pay for itself.
At
So
bare minimum, it needs to cover itself.
yeah, but when they really started cash flowing is when, I got into the bigger properties like the 70s
Okay.
Lodge. And those really, if you can buy them right and do it right, those really, you X your income when you have those type of properties. So that's when we went from 80, 90,000 to like 3 or 4 lodges, and you're, and some other smaller properties. And now you're looking at it going, wow, we did over, I think we did 1.2 last year in gross. That's gross, serious cash flow,
Totally.
for properties. And it was like all of a sudden I picked my head up after, where'd Dan go, and it was just like my head was down, just like grinding on these properties and
Yeah.
just working like a crazy man. But it just seemed like one day that my head came up like, wow, we're going to do over $1 million this year on these properties. So
You've built a legitimate operation here. I mean,
yeah.
there's a lot of moving parts. There's cash flow. What's your strategy on pricing? I mean, are you looking at like the local market for what other short-term rentals are going for?
Yeah, we use a system.
Okay. There
Got
you go.
price. Yeah, it's a very similar system to what hotels and motels use. There's a lot of different ones out there. What you hear when it comes to pricing is dynamic pricing. That's the tool. And then there's a bunch of different companies that have dynamic pricing tools. And the one I use is Price Labs. And what it does, it takes into account all the surrounding vacation rentals but it also takes into occupancy on hotels and motels for that weekend. So if everything's booked up, or everything's booking up fast, it's pushing prices up for that space. It also takes into account number of bedrooms and bathrooms in the property. And as the numbers go up, so where we're getting that high nightly rate is we can sleep 25 to 30 people in a lot of these properties. So that takes that into account as well. So, instead of $300-400 a night, you're at a couple grand a night, so, and you don't have a lot of competition either at these bigger properties. So, but the dynamic pricing tool that we use is Price Labs. And honestly, my sister Sean kind of manages most of that end of it for me. So
no, I've thought about, also considering the hotels and, commercial properties in the area at the same time of, booking of your Airbnb. It's you've got to be factoring in those prices and kind of what the kind of capacity is in all of those. What metrics do you track, if any, in terms of the kind of the financial overview or financial health of this business?
My big one is I look at the gross revenue and then I pull
Mm-hmm.
out the gross expenses. So I want to get to net, so I'm pulling out, I'm including everything in my expenses when I pull them out, including the mortgage payment, taxes, insurance, all the utilities, maintenance, cleaning, everything. So I take that gross number and then I take the gross expense number just to come down to the net. I figured we roughly, and I try to err on the high side for expenses just to be conservative. So I've averaged them all. We're at about a 65% expense ratio on off our gross. So you just deduct out, you make 100 grand, take 65% off that for expenses, and that's what you're left with. It's probably closer to 50 because we self-manage a lot of this. We don't hire a lot out. So we're probably closer to 50, but just to be conservative, I use that 65% expense number to get my net. So it's a healthy, with where we're at right now, it's definitely a healthy 6-figure income off of the properties.
Which, ultimately, that's what you want, because then that allows you to continue building your portfolio. You've got the funds, the cash flow for that next property. Now that pickle barn is finished or just about done, do you have another property in mind?
Project? Yeah, it's like, I feel like I just want to take a big breath. I think that's actually, I always say that. And then somebody's like, hey, did you see?
Yeah.
But I think we're at the spot where, we've got some really nice income coming off of it. It's just to go around and really systematize all the processes, to really do a deep dive into, just the maintenance end of things and just getting all that set up on rotating schedules to where we're kind of like, stop the bleeding. Hey, the Wheel of Fortune machines broke out at the 70 Plaza. Amy, go fix it, that type of thing, and just get on even like furnace filters and water filters and just making sure those are all on the same rotation and just kind of taking a breath. Kind of like, I feel like with the painting company, once I got to a profitable $2 million painting company, I was like, okay, that's my capacity right now. If I'm going to do all these properties, I need to just maintain this and that I feel like that's where I'm at with properties. I just always said, if I can make 10 grand a month off properties, I could retire,
Yeah.
And, now it's, we're having months where we're making 200 grand on the properties, it's like grossing, but still that's a good gross number. So
I love this story because I have a chance to talk to a lot of folks within not only the painting industry, but other trades as well. Folks who are, whether they're looking to work with us or just, exploring coaching, and everyone's got a different kind of vision or passion for, what they want their business to be or to grow to. Some want to hit the $2 to $4 million mark and have other ventures just like yourself. Others want to just focus on, that particular business and scale it. You are a perfect example of running a healthy, profitable painting business that has got a long-lasting legacy, a great reputation, and you've also have create a really diverse other stream of income that is where you have passion as well, and it's bringing you joy and it's keeping you busy and it's growing. I mean, it's being at 1.2 last year. I mean, soon enough it could bypass the revenue of the painting
Right.
company.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's like I said, it's just kind of all of a sudden you're like, wow, we're making some decent money off this now.
Yeah.
And, now it was, using the real estate expenses to offset the painting income. Because that's another, another aspect of it. You can get classified as a real estate investor, which I spend enough time. And there's a nice short-term rental caveat that allows you to write off real estate expenses against W-2 income or business income. So for a lot of years early on, fixing up these properties, I'd have a lot of negative cash flow from fixing them up. But now we're getting to the point where it's positive on both ends. To your point, the only way you can really offset that is to purchase more real estate. So
Yeah.
it's like, you're constantly in a tax strategy position. It's like, okay, what do I do now? It's a good problem to have where they're both cash flowing, but it does get you into that almost like a little bit of a hamster wheel where you're like, oh, I got to get more, get
Yeah.
more real estate. So we always seem to figure it out again with real estate: appreciation, depreciation, tax benefits, and cash flow. Those are the four beautiful things about real estate. And as a painter, a great way to leverage the painting business has been the real estate.
You found a way to be really strategic. One last question I have for you. Did you have any negative, impact or negative attitudes about, doing short-term rentals in the Traverse City area? Did you face any barriers?
Backlash.
Backlash? Yeah.
Yeah, I've kind of been through it all now, having multiple properties. It seems like that's one thing I don't think I pointed out when you asked, how I look at a property, or, when I go to purchase, what do I look at? And
Yeah.
that's probably the first thing now is the township. What township
Okay.
is it in, and what kind of neighborhood is it in? Because you can find the perfect property, but if it's not short-term rental friendly, then don't waste your time,
Yeah.
because it stops there. And safe to say, I've been in front of a lot of township boards, with different properties pleading my case, but have been successful, thankfully, where mine are located, that I'm operating within the guidelines. But that is a big consideration. And to be honest with you, I'm not buying in neighborhoods, anymore. I'm buying on acreage in township friendly short-term rental that has guidelines.
Okay.
Or in townships that don't have office hours. And I do have the Hawk Creek Lodges in the township that doesn't have office hours, and it used to be a bed and breakfast. And so it'd be very hard for them to ever, enforce any sort of short-term rental, rules, and not having office hours, So it's typically in the bigger townships that have lots of residents, thus lots of tax revenue, that have the money to put the guidelines in place, which are great. It's the townships, and the 70s Lodges in one of them, that are, it's a very conservative entrepreneurial township. So that's who's kind of running the township. But all that can change with a new township supervisor and new trustees,
Yeah.
If you get 5 years down the road, that may change, So I'm really moving forward, since I've been through some stressful times with actually my duplex. They had guidelines, which I was following, had a permit. But this is how it works with townships. They changed their mind on duplexes and said, hey, we're not going to allow, because of the housing shortage, we're not going to allow duplexes, fourplexes, or any rental apartment buildings to be able to short-term rental because of the housing shortage. So they basically gave me the permit. I got it all fixed up to short-term rental, and then they pulled it away from me. I know.
That hurts.
Thus went the rest of my hair. So
what did you do in that situation?
I spent all this money, and time making these, I call them mini Marriotts, really nice, units. And then they knew it was wrong. and they know, I mean, I paint for the township,
Right.
and I went in there and I just, sat in front of them and said, you guys know what you did was wrong, because if you were in my shoes or a family member were in my shoes, you'd feel the same way I'm feeling right now.
Yeah.
I followed your rules. I mean, probably nationally, you don't hear about them doing something like this. Even like another township supervisor that was sitting with Lisa at this meeting where I was speaking. He's the head of a big township that had banned short-term rentals. So you would think he would be sitting there telling Lisa, yeah, ban them here too. But he leaned over to her and said, the way they're doing it is completely wrong. They said, you can't like set the rules, have people follow them, put all this money into these and then pull them away, right?
Yeah, it's not good
And I was
practice.
just like, yeah, so for 3 months straight, I'd go to the meeting. There's a public forum, and I was speaking. I'm just like, you guys know what you're doing is wrong. I followed your rules. I spent 6 figures, fixing this duplex up, and now you're telling me I have to run it by the month. I'm like, you can't. So it didn't change right away, but I got creative and I said, okay, well, what if I put a pass through in between and I make it a 1 unit? Now it's a 1 unit. I'll rent it out to one family. The kids can sleep on one side, the parents can sleep on the other. I think because they knew they kind of screwed me a little bit.
Yeah.
They were like, oh, that'll work. They'll go, you can't have two kitchens. So you're going to have to make that one kitchen a wet bar. And I was like, that's kind of stupid, but okay. So I was ready to make one of the kitchens a wet bar. And then at the end of the day, the assessor came out before I pulled the kitchen out, or that the zoning administrator called me and he's like, Dan, he's like, and the zoning administrator that I dealt with in another township, he moved from Blair over to Long Lake. So he knew me. You get to know all these people, right?
Yeah.
And they know you're a good guy and they know you're just working your butt off and entrepreneurial, good guy, giving back to the community. So he's like, Dan, he's like, I looked it up. He's like, you can leave that other kitchen. You don't need to make it a wet bar. So I was able to keep both kitchens, which is kind of nice. The end of a long story is that is the property that I've attached the pickle barn to. So the duplex, so this is going full circle, Molly. The duplex that I lived in half of it, rented the other half out, to pay for it back in 1998, is now Nature's Ridge Pickle Barn cornhole spot.
That is cool.
I owe like, I don't know, like 96,000 on it. It's like got a very small nut to crack. And I'm thinking we can do multiple 6 figures on this property because it's turned into a cool little resort, so. But to answer your question about backlash from the community, you just have to make sure they've been around forever. They've been in our tourist town forever. You just have to make sure you're buying in a township that is short-term rental friendly. And I advise people not to buy. I mean, I had it. I've got these signs. Oh, here it is right here. I don't know if you can
keep noise down after 10 p.m.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you're in a neighborhood, there's one, the Lake Inn Lodge. I mean, we're like, you can't rent here if you're going to be loud after 10 p.m.
Yeah.
I mean, my sister Sean just lays down the gauntlet. If you're renting it, Molly, it was your credit card, she'd say, Molly, this place is super awesome. You're going to love all the amenities, but I know you're bringing all your girlfriends. Can't be loud after 10 p.m. You got to take it inside. Can you do that? That's the conversation with these people, It's
funny you say that because I literally, we're recording this on a Tuesday. I leave Thursday morning to go to Sedona, Arizona. A couple of my girlfriends, for a bachelorette, one of my last girlfriends from college getting married, and the place we were renting, an Airbnb, I booked it. It's the exact same. It's an awesome spot. It's like this little lodge, A-frame lodge. It's really, really great amenities, but it's in a neighborhood. And when I immediately booked it, they said, these are our 3 rules. Noise being, if you can't follow the noise rule, this is not the place for you. Don't book. And I was like,
I love it.
We're all mid-30s, late 30s.
It.
We'll be just fine. We'll probably be in bed by 10:30, 11 anyways. But I appreciated that, up front. Like this is the law of the land. And if this is not a good, rental fit, that's okay. We'll just part ways.
I love that. And that's your expectations are set, right?
Yes.
So you're going there and you're telling your girlfriends on the way, it's like, hey, we got to,
Yep.
so and that's kind of the way it is with the ones that we have. And the one that I'm talking about, Molly, it's on 3 acres. So it's not like,
Plenty of
but
space. Yeah.
when you have 20 people and the
Yes.
noise carries through the woods,
Right.
you're pissing neighbors off, with the guys in the backyard around the camp. And I get it. I wouldn't,
Hmm.
I get it. They have kids, they have, jobs, they're not on vacation. We have
Yep.
all these little signs next to the toilets that kind of, while they're sitting down doing their business, they can read,
Yeah.
about the neighborhood, so we just really have to police that. And so I'm to the point now to where I'm, if I am buying, it's going to be on property. It's going to be 5+ acres. So I'm not having to deal with that. And I'm really looking at, if I do purchase, I think one of the questions in here was, oh, where do you see the opportunity in Traverse City real estate market
Yeah.
right now? I think that other areas besides short-term rental are in boutique hotel, like
Oh.
12 or 14 room, a lot of these mom and pops motels, hotels that you see that have been running the same way forever and they're
Hmm.
just making it but barely. A lot of those are starting to go up for sale. So I think buying one of those and making a boutique, kind of like I've done with the larger properties,
Yeah.
adding amenities to them, adding, Nolan Consulting Group wants to get together for an event and they want to rent all the rooms and they want the indoor pickleball court, the hot tub,
Hmm.
so marketing it more towards big group as opposed to individual, hotel rooms, so
Yeah.
kind of taking that concept. So I think something like that. And then you don't have to deal with the zoning. It's already commercial. And then I think sober living, would be
Interesting.
sober living. My wife Lisa's a recovering alcoholic, 10 years.
Wow, that's
Excuse me. Yeah.
amazing.
So I think, just there's passion there for her,
Yeah.
with the sober living. And she's really, she's a motivational. Unbeknownst to any pressure of her put on me. I mean, she was my DD when we were dating, when we got married. She's like, honey,
Wow.
she goes, I know you're not alcoholic because you can stop. She goes,
Yeah.
back in the day, she goes, I just couldn't stop, So, but this July, I went out on the boat for the Blue Angels. We're in Traverse City over the
Oh,
bay.
sweet.
And I just said, this was 3 years ago. I'm like, what? For whatever reason, I'm like, I'm not going to drink today. And it would be of any day during the summer. It was the day after my birthday, 4th of July. And if there's any day that I'm going to have cocktails, it was that day. And that weekend, I said, I don't think I'm going to drink this weekend. And I didn't drink. And I woke up on Monday feeling so good. I was like, I'm not going to.
There's something to this.
Yeah. I go, I'm not, I just, long story short, I'm like, I'm not going to drink this week. And it's going to be 3 years in this
Wow.
July that I just haven't drank. And it's funny, I tell people I still like whiskey, I still like
Yeah.
beer, I still love the thought of it. I feel so good from not drinking, and
Mhm.
I still have the Monday morning blues and the stress and everything. I still get
Yeah.
that.
They're not
But
amplified.
yeah, I just have felt
Yeah.
so good by not drinking. I just, and I tell my friends, I'm sure I'm gonna drink at some point again. I just feel so good,
Hmm.
So I think just a sober living, I think just seeing what it's done for her, and there's alcoholism runs in my family.
Hmm.
I've got uncles and stuff that have passed away from it. I think something like that would be really cool and give me passion and set it up as a boutique sober living to where it's a
Yeah.
nice, and they have the sauna and the hot tub, and they're really going there to get sober, but
Hmm.
also a step up, and maybe like our painting business, right? It's a
Yeah.
step up. So a step up sober living, because a lot of them are like,
Yeah, not inviting. It's
right,
not going
yeah.
to encourage, that desire, the dedication to make the change. But to me, it comes full circle. Why you are in the short-term rental space, why you're doing what you're doing. It's because you have passion around all of this. This brings you joy. This gives you purpose. It makes you feel fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a way not only for, those on the receiving end who are experiencing that, that 70s lodge or the
Mm-hmm.
slice of heaven, they're coming home with an experience that you were able to give to them. And that's a pretty great why.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so Adventure North Vacation Rental is the name of it. I mean, you should be able to Google it and check
I'll
out the
make sure that we link
properties.
it in the episode description as well for folks who are interested in learning more about it and the
Yeah,
different properties.
like come to Traverse City. Come see
Yeah.
me.
And you sent me some cool photos of that pickle barn this morning. Send
Yeah,
me a few more photos of the properties and we'll link it in the Instagram as well so that folks can check it out.
I sure will. Thanks so much, Molly.
Cool.
Appreciate
Dan,
this.
this was awesome. Thank you for kind
Yeah.
of giving us kind of the journey of how you got to where you are and the passion behind it all and the challenges that also come with it. It's a great story. So thank you.
Thank you, Molly. Great to see you.
Likewise.